The lavish rooftop of the Evelyn Grand Hotel glittered with wealth, diamonds, champagne, and egos. Under the golden glow of the city lights, billionaire Charles Harrington III laughed, his deep voice echoing through the crowd. Everyone joined in, as if his laughter was law. Across the table, a black woman in a simple blue dress clutched a small notebook against her chest. Her name was Maya Brooks, and she had spent years developing an idea that could change lives, a sustainable housing project for struggling single mothers. But when she presented it to Charles, he didn't see brilliance. He saw someone he could humiliate. "You," he scoffed, eyes narrowing. "You think you can run a housing project? Sweetheart, this world runs on experience, not sympathy." Laughter erupted again. Maya's throat tightened, her eyes shimmering, not with tears, but with quiet rage. "Mr. Harrington," she said softly, "sometimes it takes losing everything to understand the value of something real." Charles chuckled. "Well, let's hope you find a rich husband before you try to change the world." The crowd howled. But as Maya turned away, a sudden gust of wind flipped open her notebook, revealing the sketches, data, and blueprints of a plan. Intricate, genius, revolutionary. Charles didn't notice. He just kept laughing. But by sunrise, he wouldn't be laughing anymore. Because that night, fate decided it was time to humble a billionaire. Charles Harrington III was the kind of man who believed the world bent at the sound of his voice. Every handshake, every smile, every polished word he spoke carried the weight of privilege. His name opened doors before he even knocked. Born into luxury, the son of the infamous banking magnate Richard Harrington, Charles grew up knowing one thing: money wasn't power, it was oxygen. Without it, nothing else mattered. By 28, he inherited Harrington Global Holdings, a billion-dollar conglomerate spread across finance, real estate, and energy. His father's sudden death left him the keys to an empire and the ego to match it. At 35, he was the golden boy of Wall Street. Magazines called him the Golden King of Finance. His life was a highlight reel: dinners with senators, yachts in Monaco, exclusive galas with billionaires, and private jets waiting at his command. But behind the cameras and the charisma was something darker. Charles enjoyed breaking people, the way a child might step on ants. He humiliated assistants for sport, mocked employees who couldn't afford designer clothes, and treated charity events as comedy clubs for his cruelty. To him, people were tools, and tools could always be replaced. The night of the Evelyn Grand Hotel Gala had been no different. A black woman, Maya Brooks, had dared to pitch him a housing initiative. Her idea was genuine, powerful, and heart-driven. But Charles saw only her skin color, her thrift store dress, her trembling voice. He turned her ambition into the crowd's entertainment. When the laughter died, he forgot her name within minutes. But the universe, it seemed, hadn't forgotten. The following morning, the first crack in his empire appeared, quiet but fatal. Charles sat in his penthouse suite, sipping imported coffee and scrolling through the financial markets on his tablet. He was preparing for a meeting with investors when his assistant, Evelyn, rushed in. Her hands trembled slightly, her face pale. "Sir," she began carefully, there's a problem." Charles didn't look up. "Evelyn, there's always a problem. That's why I pay people to solve them." She hesitated, clutching her tablet tighter. "Sir, this isn't small. Our system's been compromised. Every server, every database, it's gone. We've been hacked." Charles froze, setting down his cup. "What do you mean gone?" "I mean everything: financial records, client files, internal data. The backup servers were wiped too. It's like someone erased the company overnight." He scoffed. "That's impossible. Call IT, have them restore the drives." "Sir," she said softly, "IT can't access anything. And there's more." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "The banks have frozen our accounts. The SEC is investigating irregularities in our offshore transfers." The color drained from his face. "That's ridiculous. I control." Before he could finish, his phone vibrated on the counter. The screen flashed with a breaking news alert. "Breaking news: SEC launches fraud investigation into Harrington Global Holdings. CEO Charles Harrington under review for insider manipulation." The world seemed to stop. He scrolled frantically through the headlines. Stock prices plummeting. Investors bailing. Board members distancing themselves. Overnight, the empire he had mocked people for admiring was turning into a house of cards, and it was collapsing in real time. His phone rang. It was his CFO, David. "Charles, what the hell is going on?" David barked. Our accounts in Zurich are frozen. The European branch says the regulators seized all documents. I don't know. Charles snapped. Just fix it. Fix it. David's voice broke with frustration. You've been shifting funds between shell companies for months. Did you think no one would notice? The board's meeting tonight. They want your resignation. The line went dead. Charles's grip on the phone loosened. For the first time in years, fear crept into his chest. Within hours, the fallout worsened. Major news outlets camped outside his building. Former allies turned on him. His investors, once loyal, began to leak information. Scandals spread like wildfire: bribery, insider trading, illegal transfers. Whether true or not, it didn't matter. His name was toxic. By evening, his accounts were inaccessible, his legal team unreachable, and his reputation destroyed. He stood by his window, staring at the Manhattan skyline. The city that once bowed to him now pulsed with a quiet mockery. Flashbulbs flickered outside his building as reporters shouted his name. Mr. Harrington, do you have any comment on the investigation? Did you defraud investors? Is it true you transferred company funds offshore? Each question hit him like a bullet. He shut the curtains and stumbled back to his couch, his chest heavy. His once luxurious penthouse felt like a prison. The silence screamed louder than the chaos outside. Somewhere in Brooklyn, in a small apartment with peeling paint, Maya Brooks watched the same headlines. Her eyes softened, not with joy, but with understanding. Justice has a strange way of showing up when it's ready, she murmured, setting her cup of tea down. Her mother looked up from the couch. Is that the man who laughed at you? Maya nodded slowly. Yes, but I think life's already teaching him what he refused to learn from me. Back in the penthouse, Charles's phone buzzed again. Another alert. Harrington Global stock down 82%. Board moves to freeze assets. He stayed at the screen, the words blurring through tears of disbelief. In one night, the man who thought he ruled the world had lost everything he ever owned. And as he sat in the dark, alone and defeated, the echo of his own laughter from that gala night came back to haunt him, cruel, empty, meaningless. For the first time in his life, Charles Harrington III understood what it felt like to be powerless. The fall had only just begun. Maya Brooks lived in a small, two-room apartment on the south side of Brooklyn, a place where the walls cracked like old skin, and the heater wheezed in protest every winter night. The paint peeled, the windows stuck, and the single bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered like it too was tired of surviving. But Maya didn't complain. She had something Charles Harrington never would: resilience. Every scar on those walls reminded her of how far she and her mother had come. Angela Brooks, her mother, was a quiet woman with the kind of strength that didn't need noise to be felt. She had raised Maya alone after Maya's father abandoned them when she was just 5. She worked 3 jobs: housekeeper, bus driver, and grocery store clerk, yet never once complained. Maya remembered those years vividly, the nights they went to bed hungry, the cold mornings they warmed their hands over the gas stove, the day their landlord taped an eviction notice to the door with bright red ink. That day had changed everything. When they lost their apartment, they had nowhere to go. They lived out of an old Chevy for 3 months, showering in gas stations, eating from food pantries, and pretending it was all an adventure. But Maya knew it wasn't. She was 15 then, watching her mother hide her tears at night. It was in that cold car, under a tattered blanket, that she made a vow to herself: one day, I'll build homes so no woman, no child, no family has to live like this again. Years later, that dream became her mission. She studied architecture at night while working as a waitress by day. Her notebooks filled with sketches, eco-friendly homes powered by solar roofs, equipped with rainwater systems, and designed to bring dignity back to low-income families. It was a dream built from pain and powered by love. So when she finally got the opportunity to present her idea at the Evelyn Grand Hotel Gala, a charity event promising support for social entrepreneurs, she believed her time had come. But that night, the billionaire across the table, Charles Harrington III, turned her moment of hope into humiliation. He had looked at her like she was a joke, mocked her ideas, and laughed as the crowd followed his lead. The laughter still echoed in her ears days later, haunting her each time she closed her eyes. She replayed the moment again and again, her trembling voice, his smirk, and the audience's cruel laughter. "Sweetheart, this world runs on experience, not sympathy," he had said. And as the crowd roared, she had stood frozen, her heart cracking quietly behind a polite smile. That night, She cried, not because of the insult, but because she realized how often people like her were dismissed before they even had a chance. But her mother, Angela, had simply placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and whispered, "Don't let a man's arrogance define your worth, baby. Diamonds don't lose value because someone's too blind to see them shine." Maya wiped her tears, exhaled slowly, and whispered, "You're right, Mama. I'll let my work speak for itself." She returned to her desk and began sketching again, long into the night. 3 days later, the universe shifted. A journalist named Renee Collins reached out via email. "Ms. Brooks, I saw the video of your presentation. People are outraged by how that man treated you. Would you allow me to share your story and your project with the world?" Maya hesitated. The memory still hurt, but this time, she didn't want to hide. She typed back, her hands trembling, "Yes. Yes, you can." Within 48 hours, the article went viral. "Black woman mocked by billionaire presents brilliant solution to homelessness." Thousands shared it. Celebrities tweeted about it. Architects, engineers, and social advocates flooded her inbox. The same people who had laughed at her in that ballroom were now silent. Within 72 hours, Maya received a call from Unity Capital, a progressive venture firm that specialized in social impact. "We read your proposal," the woman on the call said. "We believe in it. We'd like to fund you, starting with $5 million in seed money." Maya froze. Her heart raced. $5 million. "Yes," the woman chuckled warmly. "We think the world needs your vision, Ms. Brooks." She couldn't speak. Tears filled her eyes as her mother came running from the kitchen. "What happened, baby?" Maya laughed and cried all at once. "We got the funding, Mama. We can finally build it, for real." Angela gasped, covering her mouth. "Praise God," she whispered. "You did it." Maya shook her head, smiling through tears. "No, we did it." A month later, the first foundation was laid. Maya stood on an empty lot surrounded by volunteers, engineers, and journalists. A large sign stood behind her. Brooks Foundation, building hope, one home at a time. The world that once mocked her now celebrated her. Interviews poured in. Companies offered partnerships. And the once-forgotten woman in the blue dress became the face of compassion-driven innovation. Meanwhile, in a cold penthouse across town, Charles Harrington sat alone, watching her interview on TV. His company was crumbling. His name was poison. His power, gone. As Maya spoke about forgiveness, hope, and resilience, Charles stared at the screen, his reflection pale and broken against hers. "Sometimes," she said in the interview, "people laugh at what they don't understand. But God has a funny way of turning mockery into motivation." Charles turned off the TV. The silence pressed against him like guilt. He had laughed at her that night. But now, the world was laughing at him. And deep down, for the first time in his life, he began to wonder if this was more than bad luck, if maybe, just maybe, this was the universe settling its score. The morning air in Manhattan felt unusually heavy, a mixture of fear and scandal that rippled through every financial tower on Wall Street. News anchors repeated his name with venom. Newspapers ran bold headlines declaring the fall of an empire. Charles Harrington under federal investigation for fraud, tax evasion, and corporate misconduct. It was chaos in every sense of the word. At first, Charles thought it would all blow over. He'd survived worse, stock dips, lawsuits, even rumors about insider trading. But this time was different. This time, the world wasn't on his side. The first blow came from the investors. Overnight, $2.7 billion vanished from company holdings. The boardroom that once echoed with praise now filled with cold stares and whispered accusations. His most loyal executives turned on him like wolves who smelled weakness. In a tense emergency meeting, the air was thick with betrayal. Charles slammed his fist on the mahogany table. "This is nonsense. We've handled investigations before. Where's your loyalty?" The CFO, David, looked him dead in the eye. "Loyalty," he said quietly. "You burned that the day you treated us like servants instead of partners. We've been cleaning up your messes for years, Charles. But this is unfixable." Charles rose to his feet, his voice shaking with rage. "I built this empire. You all were nothing before me." David crossed his arms. "You didn't build an empire, Charles. You built a house of mirrors, and now every reflection's cracking." There was a long silence before David delivered the final blow. "The board has voted. You're being removed as CEO, effective immediately." Charles's voice trembled, the arrogance finally slipping. "You can't do this." David's reply was a dagger. "You did this to yourself." The room emptied, leaving Charles standing alone amid the ghosts of his empire. The sound of the door closing behind the last board member felt like the final nail in his coffin. When he left the building that afternoon, reporters swarmed him like vultures. Cameras flashed. Microphones pushed into his face. "Mr. Harrington, how does it feel to lose your empire? Did you commit fraud, sir? Is it true your offshore accounts were seized?" Charles shoved past them, his jaw tight. But no matter how far he walked, the noise followed, in headlines, on screens, in whispers. The fall of a tyrant, Billionaire's empire exposed. By nightfall, his phone was silent. No friends, no business calls. Not even Evelyn, his assistant, who had once idolized him, dared to pick up. He was radioactive. He sat alone in his penthouse, the same one that once hosted CEOs and senators. Now, the city lights outside mocked him with their flickering glow. He poured whiskey into a crystal glass, his hand trembling. As he stared at the amber liquid, his mind replayed that night at the Evelyn Grand Hotel. The laughter, Maya's face, her calm, steady eyes, and her words, "Sometimes it takes losing everything to understand the value of something real." He had laughed then, but now those words haunted him. He threw the glass against the wall. It shattered, scattering like the pieces of his life. Days blurred together. Lawyers called with bad news. Investigators seized assets. The mansion in the Hamptons was auctioned off. The private jet repossessed. Even his art collection, gone. Charles, once worth billions, now struggled to withdraw a few $100s from a frozen account. He walked the streets in a hoodie and sunglasses, avoiding the curious stares of strangers who whispered, "Is that him?" One night, as rain poured over the city, Charles stood at his window, watching lightning flicker over the skyline. His reflection stared back, tired, unshaven, hollow. For the first time in his life, he felt the thing he had mocked in others, helplessness. He had mocked struggle, dismissed empathy, and ridiculed kindness. But now, stripped of everything, he began to see the world through different eyes. No private jet, no entourage, no applause, just silence and consequence. A week later, his penthouse was repossessed. The marble floors, designer furniture, and priceless art were gone within hours. Charles packed what little he could, a few suits, some files, and a half-empty bottle of whiskey, and walked out the front door, unnoticed. He spent the next few nights in a cheap motel on the city's edge. The kind of place he once sneered at. The bed creaked, the lights flickered, and the air smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. It was there, in that dim, lonely room, that Charles finally faced the truth. He wasn't the victim. He had built his fortune on arrogance, and now, he was drowning in it. One cold morning, he woke before dawn and wandered through the park, his coat collar pulled tight against the wind. He had nowhere to go. The benches were wet with dew, the sky still gray from the night. Then, as he turned a corner, he froze. In front of him stood a construction site. Workers moved briskly between scaffolds and trucks, laughter echoing in the chill air. But what caught his attention wasn't the work, it was the banner hanging from the fence. The Brooks Foundation, building hope, one home at a time. Charles's chest tightened, his breath caught. And there, in a bright yellow hard hat, stood Maya Brooks, the woman he had once humiliated, now smiling, giving instructions, her presence radiating quiet power. She looked confident, fulfilled, the very image of success he used to believe money could buy. Charles stood there in silence, the cold wind stinging his face. He wanted to walk away, but his feet wouldn't move. Instead, he watched as Maya knelt beside a group of volunteers, helping them lay the first bricks of a new foundation. The irony hit him like a punch to the gut. He had spent his life building skyscrapers of greed, and she was building homes of hope. For the first time in years, Charles Harrington felt something he couldn't buy, fix, or control. Shame. And beneath it, the faint stir of something even deeper. Regret. The air in downtown Chicago felt heavier that spring. The skyscrapers, which once sparkled with Charles Harrington's Empire logo, now reflected a hollow silence. His name had vanished from financial papers, replaced by whispers, scandals, and headlines that made even his allies turn away. Charles had gone from chauffeured cars to city buses, from champagne meetings to the quiet rustle of job listings at public libraries. His pride was still there, buried deep beneath the exhaustion, but each passing day chipped at it a little more. He rented a single-room apartment in the Lower West Side, where the radiator groaned louder than his thoughts. Nights were long, just him, a flickering bulb, and old photos of the man he once was. Sometimes, he'd look at his reflection in the cracked mirror and mutter, "How did I become this?" But on one gray afternoon, life placed him at a crossroads, literally. Charles had taken a detour after a job interview, walking past an underpass where a small group of volunteers were distributing food and blankets to the homeless. He wouldn't have noticed, except he heard a familiar voice. A soft, grounded tone, calm yet commanding. "Maya," he whispered under his breath. There she was, the same woman he had humiliated in front of the gala months ago. Dressed simply, her hair tied back, her hands handing out warm soup to a trembling man on the curb. Her face carried the same grace as before, maybe even more. For a moment, Charles froze. Shame rooted him to the spot. He wanted to turn away, to disobey. But something stronger pulled him forward, the faint memory of her words that night, "You measure worth by money, I measure it by kindness." He stood awkwardly near the table of supplies until Maya noticed him. Her eyes widened for a second, then softened into calm recognition. "Mr. Harrington." His throat went dry. "Maya, I didn't mean to." She raised a hand gently. "You don't have to explain. The world already did that for you." He winced, the sting of truth hitting harder than he expected. "I heard about what happened," she continued softly. "It must have been hard." He gave a small, bitter laugh. "Hard? It was hell. But maybe I needed it." Maya tilted her head. "You think losing everything was a lesson?" He nodded slowly. "I think it was mercy. Life's way of stopping me before I became worse than I already was." For the first time, she smiled faintly. "That's a rare kind of reflection, Charles." "I don't deserve reflection," he muttered. "Or forgiveness." Maya stepped closer, her voice steady but kind. "Forgiveness isn't something you deserve. It's something you accept when you're ready to change." He looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time in years, saw something more valuable than power. He saw peace. "Maya, I was cruel to you," he said, voice breaking slightly. "I mocked you in front of people just to feel big. And now I'd give anything to take it back." She paused, eyes glistening. "I know, Charles. But you can't undo the past. You can only build a new one." He swallowed hard. "How?" "Start small," she said, reaching into her bag. She handed him a folded brochure. "We're organizing a rebuild project for families displaced by the winter storms. Volunteers only. No salaries. Just hard work." He stared at the paper. His thumb brushed the printed words Community Restoration Initiative. "You'd let me help?" he asked quietly. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she said with a gentle smile. "Even billionaires." That night, Charles sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the brochure under the lamplight. For the first time in months, he felt something. Not guilt, not pride, but purpose. The next morning, he showed up. The site was a chaotic patch of mud and steel beams. Workers shouted, kids ran around with paint rollers, and laughter filled the air. Charles stood there, unsure of where to begin. Then Maya appeared, clipboard in hand, wearing a yellow vest smudged with dirt. "You came," she said. He nodded. "I wasn't sure if I'd fit in." "You don't need to fit in," she said kindly. "Just show up, that's where it starts." And so he did. He carried bricks, unloaded trucks, mixed cement with his own hands, hands that had once only touched luxury. The people didn't care who he used to be, they only cared that he worked beside them, ate with them, and listened. Every evening, when the sky blazed orange, Maya would walk beside him through the unfinished homes, talking about life, empathy, and resilience. One night, as they stood overlooking the construction site, Charles said quietly, "You saved me, you know." Maya smiled, her gaze distant but warm. "No, Charles. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to start again." And for the first time in years, maybe ever, Charles Harrington felt like a man worth saving. By the third month of volunteering, Charles had stopped counting days. What once felt like punishment had turned into quiet healing. Each morning, the blisters on his palms stung less, and the ache in his heart lightened more. The man who once ruled skyscrapers now helped rebuild homes for families who had lost theirs. He had learned to show up before sunrise, carrying coffee for the crew. The workers had stopped whispering his name in disbelief. Now, they greeted him with smiles and claps on the back. To them, he wasn't Charles Harrington, billionaire, anymore. He was just Charlie, the guy who knew how to fix a broken generator or calm a crying child. But humility has a way of testing even the reformed. One afternoon, while helping unload supplies, a sleek black car pulled up to the construction site. The tinted window rolled down, and out stepped Daniel Gray, Charles's former business partner. The man who had once toasted champagne beside him at luxury galas now wore a smug grin, tailored suit, and expensive watch glinting under the sun. "Well, well," Daniel said mockingly, "if it isn't the mighty Charles Harrington. Mixing cement now. How poetic." A few workers paused, watching. Maya looked up from her clipboard, her expression unreadable. Charles wiped his hands on his jeans and met Daniel's gaze calmly. "Afternoon, Daniel." "You've really fallen," Daniel sneered. "You should have taken the settlement when you had the chance. But you wanted honor, didn't you? Look where that got you, living with peasants." There was a time when such words would have burned Charles's pride. But now, he only felt an odd sense of pity. "I'd rather build homes than destroy them," he said quietly. "And I'd rather work with honest people than dine with snakes." Daniel's smirk faltered for just a second. "You'll regret this, Charles. You could have had it all again." Charles shook his head. "No, Daniel. For the first time, I already do." Maya stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. "Mr. Gray, we're a little busy here. If you're not volunteering, please move your car. You're blocking the supplies." The crowd chuckled lightly. Daniel flushed, shot one last glare at Charles, and drove off, tires screeching on the gravel. When the dust settled, Maya turned to Charles with a half-smile. "You handled that well." He exhaled, laughing softly. "The old me would have thrown him in the mud. And the new you. The new me hopes he finds what I did before it's too late." Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the skeletal frames of half-built houses, Charles sat with Maya on a wooden beam. The sky was streaked with gold and purple, painting everything in peace. "I used to think success was about being untouchable," Charles said quietly. "But the truth is, it's about being reachable. To people, to life, to kindness." Maya smiled, her eyes glimmering. "That's the hardest lesson, to let go of the idea that you're above anyone." He nodded slowly. "Funny thing is, when I fell, I thought I lost everything. But I found something I never had, people who don't care about my last name, only my heart." A gentle wind brushed through the half-built homes, carrying laughter and hammer sounds in the distance. Suddenly, a young boy ran up, holding a broken wooden toy plane. "Mr. Charlie, can you fix it?" Charles took the plane carefully, inspecting it. "I think we can. But you'll have to help me." Together, they glued and sanded the plane until it could glide again. The boy's eyes lit up. "You did it." Charles smiled. "No, we did." Maya watched from a few feet away, her heart swelling. This was the same man who once mocked her for wearing second-hand shoes, now kneeling in the dote, fixing toys for children. That night, as the crew packed up, Maya handed him a small envelope. Inside was a simple thank you card signed by all the volunteers, with a note at the bottom. "True wealth isn't measured by what you own, but by how much love your actions leave behind." Charles ran his fingers over the words, his throat tightening. He whispered, "They are teaching me more than I could ever give." Maya chuckled softly. "That's the thing about humility. It doesn't take, it transforms." He looked up at her, eyes glistening under the golden dusk. "Maya, do you think people can ever truly change?" She thought for a moment. "Only if they are brave enough to face who they used to be and still choose to be better." Charles smiled faintly, his voice trembling but sure. "Then maybe I'm finally becoming someone I don't have to apologize for." As the last light faded, he stayed behind for a moment, staring at the rows of half-finished homes. They stood as symbols of ruin rebuilt, pride reshaped, and hearts restored. In that quiet hour, Charles realized the truth that no empire had ever taught him. Humility isn't weakness. It's the strength to rebuild without needing applause. And for the first time in his life, the man who once owned everything finally understood what it meant to deserve something. A year had passed since that first afternoon when Charles Harrington had walked up to Maya Brooks, ashamed and broken. The winter storms were long gone, and in their place stood a thriving neighborhood of newly built homes, neat rows of pastel houses, children playing in the yards, and laughter ringing through streets that used to be rubble. On the morning of the grand opening ceremony, sunlight poured through the clouds like a blessing. Banners hung across the gates, Community Restoration Project, a future built together. News vans lined the streets. Cameras clicked, reporters whispered, and a gentle wind fluttered through the crowd of hundreds gathered to witness history. Maya Brooks stood on the small wooden stage, dressed in simple ivory, holding a microphone with grace that needed no diamonds. Her once soft voice now carried strength, authority, and warmth, the kind born not from power, but from purpose. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her eyes scanning the faces before her, workers, families, volunteers. A year ago, this was nothing but dust and despair. Today, it's proof of what compassion and unity can build. Applause erupted, heartfelt and thunderous. She smiled faintly. This project was built by many hands, hands that carried bricks, that painted walls, that cooked meals when others were too tired to stand. Every one of them is a part of this miracle. Then, she paused, her tone softening. And among those hands was one that once hurt me. A hush swept through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Curious eyes turned as Maya gestured toward the side of the stage. From the crowd, a tall man in a faded gray shirt stepped forward, shoulders steady, eyes humble, but glowing with quiet redemption. Charles Harrington. The same man who once mocked her in public now stood before hundreds of people not as a billionaire, but as a builder, a servant of the same community he once ignored. Gasps and murmurs spread through the audience. Some recognized him, others whispered disbelief. But Maya's calm gaze never left his. "He learned humility," she continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "And through that humility, he reminded us all that redemption isn't about who you were, it's about who you choose to become." Charles swallowed hard. His eyes glistened as he stepped to the microphone, his voice unsteady. "Thank you, Maya," he said softly. "And thank you, everyone. I don't deserve your applause. I wanted to build something that lasts. Something honest." He looked out at the families smiling, at the children chasing balloons across the field. "For years, I thought wealth was about control. But real wealth," his voice cracked, "real wealth is standing here and knowing you helped someone else stand taller." The crowd broke into applause, not the polite kind given to rich men, but the kind given to good men. Tears welled in Maya's eyes as she placed a hand over her heart. "Sometimes," she said into the MIC, "the greatest transformations happen not in the boardroom, but in the heart." After the ceremony ended, the two stood at the edge of the new neighborhood as families moved into their homes. Children waved from porches, couples carried boxes, laughter filled the streets. Charles stood beside Maya, his hands tucked into his pockets, watching the world he helped rebuild. "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" he asked quietly. Maya turned to him, her face glowing in the evening light. "No," she said softly, "because if they had, you wouldn't be standing here." He nodded slowly, emotion tightening his throat. "You built homes for them, Maya, but you gave me something I never had." She tilted her head, smiling. "What's that?" He looked at her, eyes misty. "A heart." The words hung between them, simple, honest, and full of grace. Maya blinked back tears, her voice gentle. Then it was all worth it. They stood in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the new homes in hues of gold and rose. The sounds of laughter and music floated in the distance. For a long time, neither spoke. Then, quietly, Maya said, "Do you know the difference between guilt and redemption?" He looked at her curiously. "Guilt keeps you chained to who you were," she said softly. "Redemption helps you walk toward who you can become." Charles smiled faintly. "And what if I'm still walking?" She smiled back. "Then keep walking. You're already facing the right way." The breeze carried her words like a blessing, and for the first time since that humiliating night at the gala, Charles laughed. Not cruelly, not arrogantly, but freely. It was the laugh of a man reborn. And as they stood together, watching life bloom in the place where despair once lived, the city lights began to twinkle one by one, tiny beacons of hope in the deepening dusk. Charles turned to Maya one last time and whispered, "You gave me back my soul." Maya's eyes softened. "No, Charles. You just finally learned how to use it." And in that moment, beneath the orange glow of sunset and the echo of children's laughter, a billionaire who once mocked kindness found redemption not in riches, but in love, humility, and grace. Sparkles sometimes, the greatest fortune is found in the heart you rebuild after losing everything else. Sparkles.